Welcome to Grace Abounds. I'm Pastor Emily Baton. Today, I will be sharing with you my Sunday sermons from St. John's Lutheran Church in Palm Desert, California. Thank you for joining us, and may you find grace, peace, and comfort in the message today. Now, I have a bone to pick with the creators of the lectionary this morning. The lectionary being the way we determine which texts are read each Sunday. And for those of you who were here last week, you might notice that the text sounds very familiar. And this is because it is also a story about Jesus appearing to the disciples after he is risen from the dead. So, why, might I ask, did they pick the same story, except from Luke, to follow it directly? It could be to personally attack me and make my sermons harder to preach. But that's probably not the case. It could be to emphasize the importance of Jesus' resurrection. Okay, more likely. It could also be to gain a different perspective on this event. We do not have to look very far to find examples of story retelling in the Bible. It is full of repeated and retold stories, many that highlight different areas of the original story or contradict it altogether. So why not make it easier and clearer for the people who read it and those who preach on it by simply picking their favorite version? Well, not to mention that the debate over which text would make it in might run for centuries or longer. I know because our specific biblical canon took hundreds of years for it to be solidified and yet is still debated today. But it also leaves its ultimate interpretation for the reader. The Bible simply carries the story and presents them. It is an amalgamation of narratives, poems, letters, songs, the list goes on and on. All of it comes together in the form of a work of art, our sacred text. And from this sacred text comes our story for today. Just as last week, Jesus appears before the disciples after rising from the dead. The same elements are present. Jesus enters and says, "Peace be with you." The disciples are afraid and doubtful, and Jesus shows them the marks on his hands and the gash in his side. But this time, Thomas is not singled out as not having been there before. And this time, Jesus asks for food. This difference shifts our main focus to Jesus and his corporeal form, that his body is truly here, raised from the dead as he eats among his friends. What these texts have in common also gives us great insight. And something that is very consistent between both of these accounts is Jesus' greeting by saying, "Peace be with you." Now, as I mentioned, "peace be with you" was a very normal greeting for Jewish people. It could be used to say hello or goodbye, the word peace being shalom in Hebrew. And shalom is a very expansive word, not just holding peace for the person you're greeting, but peace with God and restorative peace with all of creation. And when Jesus says, "Peace be with you," he is offering reconciliation for the disciples that are scared, but also for the community they're afraid of and the environment that surrounds them, all in the promise of God. Shalom represents life-giving relationship with each other, the triune God and creation. This is what we are offering when we say to each other, "Peace be with you" on a Sunday morning. all from this one line, peace be with you, and one word, shalom. It really is remarkable how much depth resides in these stories told over and over again. There is a great verse from one of my favorite hymns that goes, I love to tell the story, for those who know it best seem hungering and thirsting to hear it like the rest. And when in scenes of glory I sing the new song, I'll sing the old story that I have loved so long. It doesn't matter how many times the word is shared, each time is more precious than the last. This sacred text that has held these stories for thousands of years. And we were, of course, not the first to find its contents sacred. Before it was even written, people carried these stories in their memories, sharing them orally generation after generation, and each time sharing the message, peace be with you. Each sacred text holds particular significance to those who read it and special practices that surround it. We as Christians tend to carry a Bible with us, using a smaller copy, but then lifting it in worship as we all stand to hear the gospel. In Muslim tradition, the sacred text, the Quran, is written in Arabic. And since it began as an oral tradition, it was ritually memorized and recited, something that still takes place today. And from the Jewish tradition, the Torah is handwritten in Hebrew on a long, uninterrupted scroll, which is placed in the tabernacle. When taken out, it is sung by a rabbi or a cantor. Interestingly enough, a greeting of peace is shared by all three of these traditions, which is not surprising given that all these sacred texts share sacred stories. And yet, they are each individually interpreted and cherished by the followers of their traditions. During one of the interfaith events that my family was invited to, I met a cantor from one of the local Jewish temples, and his name was Larry. While in conversation, he asked if we would like to see the Torah scroll. Well, we were incredibly honored, and I personally was beside myself with excitement. It is not every day that you get to see the sacred text of another tradition. And when he unrolled it, it took my breath away. The precision of the text was incredible, and equally impressive was when Cantor Larry started to sing the section in front of us, and then translate the story of Joseph and his coat of many colors. As he finished singing and began to roll up the scroll, he said, the story of this particular Torah is just as important as the ancient stories it contains. He went on to tell us that this Torah had been written by hand in the early 1800s. It was later smuggled out of Poland during World War II. It ended up in the hands of a man named Joseph. And Joseph was a Holocaust survivor himself, haunted by the things that he saw and the choices he had to make. And so he decided to gift this scroll, full of stories of pain and anguish in its own right, to restore some peace in his heart. Cantor Larry then showed us the outside cover of the scroll. And if you look at the strip of fabric at the bottom there are names stitched, and those are the names of Joseph's family members who did not survive the concentration camps. It was then that Cantor Larry looked each one of us in the eye tears in his own, and said, "The story of this scroll was passed on to me, and now I gift it to you. For if you tell this story, then it can never die." And so, as Joseph carried it, as Cantor Larry told it, as I heard it and tell it again to you now, you also carry the story of this Torah scroll and the names that surround it. It is now our responsibility to make sure this story and stories like them live on. We each hold our own sacred stories, told over and over again. Each time in their telling, a truth is named and peace is reclaimed. That is why we must repeat them and hear them from different perspectives, languages, and voices, so that peace may reconcile us to each other, to God, and to all of creation. And so, may you hear it again. Peace be with you. Amen. Thank you for listening. Each week's episode is edited by Nick Cox with music by St. John's Worship Band. This week's sermon is by me, Pastor Emily Baton. Make sure to subscribe, and if you would like to know more about St. John's mission to know Christ and make Christ known, please visit our website at stjohnslutheran.church. May God be with you this day.